Good evening, everyone. I'm very excited to moderate this amazing webinar on safety and developmental milestones. I'm Maristella Lucchini. I'm a sleep researcher at Nanit Lab, and I've been part of this team for around 1 year. I've been a researcher for 10 years. I was working at Columbia, and the focus of my work is sleep in the perinatal period. This had to do a lot with my experience as a mom, struggling with sleep. But definitely sleep is not the only thing that we struggle with as parents, and milestones and safety are big topics too, which is why I'm super excited to introduce you to our amazing panelists. So Holly and Casey, take it away. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks everyone for joining us today. So my name's Choi. I'm the co-owner of Safe Beginnings First Aid, and you may know me from my Instagram account, Safe Beginnings. That's where I give parents easy tips to keep their babies and toddlers safe. I work in injury prevention, but specifically for babies and toddlers. So I'm a Red Cross First Aid instructor. I'm a child passenger safety technician instructor. That's a lot of words to say. I am certified in car seat stuff in Canada and the US. And I'm the vice president of the Child Passenger Safety Association of Canada. And then I also work in baby proofing. So I'm a member of the International Association for Child Safety. Our organization runs a website called childproofingexperts.com and prevent child injury. So really anything to do with baby or toddler safety, I am all over it. And those are my cute kids. I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old. I'll pass it over to you, Casey.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for having me and for everyone for joining. I'm so excited. I am Casey. I'm a pediatric physical therapist. I am the founder of Milestones in Motherhood on Instagram, which might be where some of you know me from. I also have an in-person pediatric physical therapy office, and I have my doctorate in physical therapy. I've been working in pediatrics for a little over 10 years now, actually. And yeah, I just, like Holly, I love all things motor milestones and development and all of that. I also have 3 little ones of my own. I have a 5-year-old, a 4.5-year-old, and that's not true, a 3.5-year-old and a 2-year-old. So yeah, that's me.
That's awesome. So now we definitely know we are in great hands for these topics. So I just want to go over quickly our schedule for tonight. So we will first chat about baby safety and then discuss about important developmental milestones and how can we adapt our homes to be safe. And then our experts will share some key takeaways, but also some, recommendations about helpful products. And then lastly, we want to open it up for Q&A session. So feel free to post all your questions throughout or keep them for the end, but we really want to hear from you guys. One last reminder, information before we start. So we have an amazing giveaway for tonight. The lucky winner will get a Nanit Sound and Light, which is an amazing product. I have kids from 1 to 8. I use that every night. So I'm so excited for you guys. Just wait till the end. We're going to share in the chat the winner at the end of the session. In addition to that, there's also a grand prize winner for our All Summit, and that will be announced at the end of the week. And that is for a $500 gift card to spend on nanit.com. So that's also incredible. So now that we have got through all the housekeeping stuff, let's dive in. And so, as I said, we're going to start around baby safety. So Holly, I'll pass it on to you. And baby safety, like, it's such an incredible and ginormous topic. We could talk about so many things. So I just wanted to start thinking, when there is a new parent, what is just like a general suggestion that you would give to them as they start to approach this daunting topic? Where would you start?
Yeah, it's a huge topic for sure. One of the things that I like to focus on, and especially it's great we have Casey here with us today too, is trying not to make assumptions about a child's development. A lot of times, if you hear someone tell a story about a child getting injured, the story always starts with something like, oh, I just looked away for 2 seconds and it's always just that they didn't expect a child was going to be able to do something and then they surprise them. So if you start to think, well, they can't roll or they can't crawl or they can't walk, that could be the day they do, or it could be tomorrow. So it's really important not to make those assumptions questions about what they are or are not capable of. But the other one I would say too is that you really have to think like a baby or toddler to be able to make their environment safe. I think we often, would we as adults think about, eating out of a litter box? Probably not. But would a baby or toddler? Sure, totally. And so things like that, where you have to think, okay, what's at their level, and would they know that that's not something we do yet? So really being able to put yourself in their shoes is super, super important when it comes to creating those safe environments.
That's such a different perspective, and I think it's such an advice you can apply in so many different circumstances. So that's really great. And how can we balance this desire to want to be safe and do their best for our children without going full on the end of the spectrum and losing our mind and thinking everything can be a hazard, right?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, thank you for asking that question. So I'm a very anxious person, and being postpartum, I think, really magnified that for me. And I know that that's an experience a lot of parents have, hormones or not, just because having the responsibility of a child is a lot, especially when you're a first-time parent. So for me, that feeling of I don't want to be that, stereotypical helicopter parent, but I always feel like something's about to happen. So there's a mindset tool that I like to use. And I suggest that if you haven't done this before, try it over the next week. And that's being able to decide if something that you're making a safety decision about is a risk or a hazard. So I'll give you some examples of both and how that works. A risk is something where maybe someone could get hurt, maybe someone might get injured, but you're going to have a benefit to it. The benefit could be developmental, could be emotional or social, but there's that potential for a benefit. So a really, simple example would be crossing the street. Yes, there's traffic on the street, but it's manageable. It's a manageable risk. I can look both ways before I cross the street. And the benefit is I get to go do whatever I'm doing on the other side of the street, right? I get to move on with my day. In terms of kids and things like playing, the concept of risky play or just letting kids take risks for developmental growth, a kid might fall if they're climbing, but they might also learn something about gravity. They might develop some tone in their body somewhere that they didn't have before. So it's things like that where you have to be able to determine is that thing going to have a potential benefit. So on the side of that, a hazard is something we just want to avoid, period. A really obvious example for that one would be we don't let babies play with broken glass, right? There is no benefit to that. That is a hazard. That's just a no. But one that might be less obvious is not buckling a child in the car seat properly every single ride. We might think, oh, it's just 5 minutes down the street to daycare. I don't need to take that extra 30 seconds. But that's a very real hazard. We know that a lot of crashes happen close to home. So it's things like that. Is there a benefit to a child not being buckled properly? No, not really, not for them at least. And so if you can see, is that thing in front of me a risk or is it a hazard? If it's a hazard, we avoid it. And if it's a risk, then we can weigh within our own risk tolerance if that's a risk that we're willing to take. And so that for me, I think before all of my anxiety was putting everything in the hazard bucket and all of the warning bells were going off. But really, a lot of the things I was worried about were risks, and being able to take a step back and go, you know what? Yeah, they might scrape their knee, but that's going to happen. And then we have to learn about gravity too. So just know we want to prevent the serious injuries. I think that's the most important thing.
Thankfully, you picked the example of climbing because I have 3 little monkeys, and that's definitely something that I had to deal with many times. Sort of deciding when do we need to stop, what is okay, and I think that the framework that you put can be helpful in all these little decisions that sometimes we kind of like decide with our guts, but if we stop a second and we say, okay, in which bucket do I put this? It can be so helpful, and I think it definitely prevents so many possible injuries. So if you had to sort of pick and choose, like, around the house, where are the top places where if you had to start with, like, yes, you need to go check this, and that? Are there some areas that are like, that rings our bells and say, yes, let's look at that first?
So along that line of preventing serious injuries, right? Our goal is always that's where we're going to prioritize our time. There are a lot of little things that will happen, but what is going to give me the most bang for my buck? And when it comes to preventing serious injuries, there are 3 really big ones that I always think of. One is always anchoring our furniture. So any furniture you have in your home that's heavy or can become top heavy. So like the stuff I have behind me, a bookcase is, I'm out of focus, taller than it is deep. That can make it naturally top heavy. But coming back to that thought of what I was saying earlier about trying to be in that child's shoes, bookcases, especially when this doesn't have doors on it, it looks like a ladder. When you pull the drawers out of a dresser, it looks like stairs. And so kids see that and think that's a great way for me to get up there. I can climb that. I'm really interested in what my parent has put up there and is trying to, keep me away from. And that's when we have tip over injuries. And those we're really lucky if we get second chances with tip over injuries. For me, this is one that I feel is just a non-negotiable. Now, a question I often get, and in case anyone's watching this rolling their eyes at me right now, is about rentals. If you rent and you have a landlord that says something to you like, hey, you can't put holes in the wall, because that I think is kind of a universal statement a lot of people make as landlords. So there's a few things I always put out there as suggestions. When we obviously want to prioritize our child's safety, but sometimes there's financial repercussions to these types of things. So get it in writing, ask your landlord, hey, I am wanting to anchor my furniture for my child's safety. I just want to confirm that that's okay and you're not going to take away my security deposit. And then if they say, no, I'm not feeling good about that, you can also check with your local tenancy board and see if there's any legislation that will protect you in that situation. But most landlords, if you just say, hey, it's for the safety of my child, and you have it in writing, they'll let you do it at that point. So that would be my advice around that one. But the other 2 that are really big for me are gates on stairs. Please make sure you are using gates on stairs. Falls are a leading cause of hospitalization for babies. And falls down the stairs are just particularly more traumatic because of the mechanism of that injury. But also windows. I think windows are really overlooked. And I know that, I guess it's officially fall now, I just realized. But coming out of the summer, that's where we see a lot of that happening when people have windows open. But ideally finding a way to limit your windows so that they can't open more than 4 inches. That's the golden number where we don't think a child will be able to get their head out of the window. Just being mindful that kids love the sound of the garbage truck, a fire truck. They are drawn to that. They're drawn to the window, what's going on outside, but they carry so much of their weight in their head when they're babies and toddlers. We really want to keep them away from open windows.
Wow, these are great advice. And for sure, the window one for me was a huge one. I remember during the pandemic in New York, we used to clap outside the window for our essential workers. And I remember one evening we were all there, and in a matter of 2 seconds, our son was just sort of getting so excited, and you don't think about it, like you're right next to him, and it's like these little things. And I think it's great to have these tips in mind. And one thing I just wanted to touch upon, and I know it's a huge topic, but I see in the back of your room a little car seat. Can you tell us just like a couple of words before we have to move to our next topic?
Yeah, I would say for me, please always know that the people that are out there that want to help you with your car seats truly do it because we want your child to be safe, and we want to prevent those serious injuries. Motor vehicle collisions are also a leading cause of death for children, and it's something that can be reduced by up to 71% if we're using a car seat correctly. And I always just come from the perspective, little over 8 years ago, when I took that training course myself for the first time, I was so confident I was using my car seat correctly, and I can't tell you how many mistakes I was making. And in the thick of postpartum hormones, I nearly had a full breakdown about it, just thinking, wow, I'm not qualified to be a parent. And that's really honestly why I do this, because I don't want people to feel that way. And I want you to know that the child passenger safety technicians, CPSTs, or car seat techs that are out there, if you can connect with one and get your car seat checked, you might think you're doing everything right. I can tell you I've checked thousands of car seats in the 8 years I've been doing this. I have not seen 10% used correctly. And we know you're not doing that on purpose. And we know that if you come to us and ask us for help, that you're doing it because you just want what's best for your kid. So please, if you haven't had a car seat check, you can go to safekids.org in the US, or in Canada, sipsac.org. And I'm going to type that in the chat while Casey's talking in case anyone wants to take a screenshot of that for later, because those are longer URLs. But please get your car seat checked. It's one of the most dangerous things we do every day is driving around on roads, and it's easy to make that something that we know is good and safe just by getting it checked.
Awesome. That was very helpful. Thank you. And please, yes, put it in the chat. I'm sure a lot of people will want to go and check it out. So while you do that, we can sort of move on to our next big topic, which is developmental milestones, because, you know, we have a newborn and the next day we have a toddler and things move on fast. I'm not sure how, but I have an 8-year-old and I feel like it was yesterday I was cuddling with her. And so we need to be able to adapt our spaces and to keep our house safe for them. And so I just wanted to direct to Casey this question. Can we maybe go through some of the major developmental milestones and sort of give for each of them some quick tips that, you know, our parents can know? And I feel like it's great, even if you have a newborn, to know a little bit what it's coming ahead, so you can prepare yourself and you know, just start to get into that mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. So like Holly said, I feel like one of the biggest components is the tendency to underestimate what our kids can do, because they're changing so quickly, and because like every day they're figuring something new out, they're doing all of these little things. And even if they're not doing the full milestone yet, they're still becoming more and more mobile or exposed to more and more things within their environment that they might not have rolled to before or been able to crawl to, or their sibling left down and they can now get it and they put it in their mouth. So I think that's one of the biggest components, is kind of almost anticipating ahead of time or taking steps ahead of time, especially when it comes to things like the crib, which we'll talk about, and like having a yes space if you do have older siblings, or if you have pets that are, you know, all over the place and maybe gonna trample them a little bit when they're doing tummy time. So yeah, just in terms of the milestones, really in that first year to 18 months that we're looking for, that kind of directly relate to this, are really being on the floor, having time on the floor to do tummy time, and on their back, starting to work towards rolling both directions, getting in and out of sitting, crawling, pulling to stand, all of those pre-walking skills right up through independent walking, and like stair navigation, which obviously is a whole nother element of safety. But yeah, I would say one of the biggest things would go directly off of what Holly said, with really like kind of knowing what milestones are likely coming next, and anticipating the way that they're working on them, even if they aren't quite doing the full skill yet, and making sure their environment is safe and supportive in that way.
Awesome. So thinking about this anticipation, why don't we start with, is there anything that we can do even maybe before the baby comes? Like, is there anything, I see that there are some expecting moms that are connected. Is there anything that we can do even before the baby arrives to prepare for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say one of the biggest ones would probably be creating a space for them, with something like a yes space that is completely, there's nothing that's off limits. They can get to it, they can play with it. There's nothing that you're going to have to run from the other side of the room and take out of their hands. I feel like having an intentional space that is safe for them for every stage, whether it's just a blanket on the floor with nothing around it, or a blanket on the floor with a little, they have those little like pop-up gates kind of
Super yard, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Or if you really need a truly safe space, you could do something like a pack and play for floor time until they're a little bit bigger. So I would say, even before baby is here, kind of thinking through your living space, your family dynamic, your family situation, the other kids you might have, and kind of just being intentional about like, what is a way that you can create a space where, like I said, nothing is off limits. Like, they are safe, they're good, you can, do what you have to do, be there with them with eyes on, but not be stressing that they're gonna stumble on something or find something that they shouldn't have.
That's great. And so I was thinking also about like CPR classes. That's something that popped in my mind before the baby came, right? What do you think about that?
I mean, I would love if hospitals did not let people go home until they have
I
CPR
know, right?
It's kind of wild to me that they just let you go with the whole human that you have to take care of and like try to keep safe. And I just feel CPR and first aid, even if you're not a parent, like Holly, I know I'm going to turn it to you because I know this is your specialty. I could urge every single human to be CPR certified. And even if hopefully you never ever need it, but God forbid you do, like the empowerment in that moment, knowing at least a little bit, what to do to help, is like, whether it's your kids or someone else, like things happen all the time. Yeah, anyway, sorry, Holly, go.
Yeah, I would say like I've been teaching workshops in person for a long time now, and we would say maybe 50% of the people that come to us for those workshops are still expecting, but it's something that you're never going to learn it too soon, because those skills are relevant from day one. And not to, I don't like to like fearmonger or anything, because using these skills is rare and hopefully you never use them. That's the point, right? But where we see the highest incidences of using CPR is between 0 to 6 months for small children. And it's just because their respiratory systems are so delicate at that age, illnesses that they could pick up and they don't have antibodies yet, right? So that's where we see that. But a lot of people are coming to us when baby is closer to 6 months because of choking. And those choking skills are usually 6 to 12 months is where, if they're used typically in those months. So a food for thought would be, just sooner than later, whether you learn from me or someone else, it's just really important to have those skills. Just make sure you're going to someone that is a qualified instructor, and make sure that you do it regularly, because it's important to keep those skills up to date and learn for the rest of your family too, not just baby, learn for everyone.
And I think it's a great suggestion that, like, again, hopefully you're never going to use it, but the empowerment and the confidence that you get once you learn those things, it just gives you a peace of mind to go through so many moments of your life when something can happen, and you can't predict it, but knowing that you have those skills, just that just gives you this peace of mind. And I think that is an amazing component of becoming a parent. What are the tools that can give me this peace of mind so that I can go about my day confident that I've done everything that I could, and in the interest of my baby. And before the baby comes, we prepare for so many things that I'm sure are like half as important as doing this, CPR classes. So and it's so when the baby comes, we talked about this yes space, and then I think like two things that come to mind that maybe we should talk about a little is like where we put the baby to sleep, and when we change the baby, which as a parent, I remember was such a tricky thing because they start to wiggle and you you just want to make sure that, you know, you're putting them in a place where they're not going to fall and nothing is going to happen. So what are some of suggestions around that?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest thing that sticks out for me in terms of safe sleep environment in related to motor skills specifically is dropping your crib way, 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 way before you think you should. So what I mean by that is most cribs have 3 levels, right? And when you have a newborn and you're postpartum and you don't want to be leaning way over, you have it on the highest level. But baby is going to roll in their crib. The majority of babies practice skills in their crib and or on a softer surface well before they do it on the floor. And that's part of the surface supporting them. It's part of what their brain is doing when they're sleeping and they're resting and they're working through some of those motor patterns and creating those neurons. But the amount of times I have had a parent say to me, I looked at the monitor and they were on their belly for the first time ever, or they were sitting up in their crib for the first time ever, or they were standing up for the first time ever. And they're like, whoa, you know, but being proactive and dropping your crib to like, if you can get in there and have good body mechanics, the lowest setting possible is by far the biggest tip that I have, especially when you get to the stage where if you have a little bit of a climber and they are trying to get out of the crib, lowering it. And then also like you can put sleep sacks on so that they can't hike a leg up and over it if they're really a climber. So I would say in terms of motor skills and considering your sleep space, really being proactive and dropping the crib well before you think you have to. And then, you know, just kind of keeping an eye on what they're doing. And if they're in their crib and they're really close to pulling up to stand, or they're really all of a sudden loving climbing, you know, kind of just being conscious of that and saying, okay, maybe we'll use a sleep sack for a little while so they don't climb out, or maybe we'll, you know, have the Nanit right on them while they're in there so we can see and know and that kind of thing.
Oh, do you have any other suggestions about cribs or changing tables?
Yeah. Oh, changing tables is a big one for me. As I mentioned earlier, they are, and the majority of those falls from an elevated surface. And they're happening again because it's really easy to make that assumption that a baby couldn't roll. But the roll doesn't have to be intentional. There are rolls where it's a milestone roll, and then there's rolls where it's just their head was heavy and they physically just went over, or their arm went up and it took them over. So babies can roll from day one is what I'm trying to get across, and they carry 30% of their body weight in their head. So that makes them really prone to those falls. So it's, again, easy to make those assumptions. Try to avoid making those assumptions if you can. It's such a problem that the pediatric societies around the world now suggest that we change diapers on the ground if we're physically able to do that, because it happens so often. Again, it's that I looked away for 2 seconds and you know, there's no harm in changing a baby on an elevated change pad. I change my babies on elevated change pads, but the 2 rules of thumb are: 1, you always have to have a hand on the baby. Just having, you know, the strap is not enough. So 1, use the strap. 2, have the hand on. All the strap is there to do is just give you enough freedom to take one of your hands off the baby. So you can grab the wipe or diaper that's over here. Your other hand has to still be there, because kids have gone off the other way by going sort of vertically off the change pad. Or sometimes, again, just if the change pad isn't anchored to anything, they could take the change pad with them. So again, try to avoid those assumptions. And if you can, do it on the ground. By the time they're a toddler, you usually end up there anyway, just because it's needed.
And by my 3rd kid, I did not have any space left for any changing table. So that's where it happens naturally.
Truth.
We are Clyde, of a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 kids. So that was a safety tip for all the New Yorkers.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I was thinking about when I was changing the kids is also that very often we don't have everything handy. Like I remember for the first kid, I thought about all like the organization that looked great. And then the first time I had to change it, I'm like, well, but I actually need this thing and actually need that. And they were all so far away. And by that time, I had already taken away the diaper. Pee was everywhere. And so thinking about what are the things I'm going to need, I need to have them like at the distance of an arm length so that everything is closed. And, I'm not going to have to go around the apartment. So that for me was like a discovery that was like, duh, of course.
Yeah.
Of course,
Keep it stocked, keep it well stocked, and make sure that everyone else that's changing diapers knows that's the rule too, so that you don't get caught without stuff.
Exactly. Another thing I was thinking, just going back to safe sleep, and that's a little bit of my bias as sleep researcher that I think we should mention. And there's going to be a webinar and an AMA that's happening. So if you want to just, dive in that, feel free to tune into these other opportunities to learn more. But, thinking about a space that needs to be super empty. And I think like with my first two kids, I was like, yeah, sure, that's easy. And then the third kid came and my older kids were throwing stuff in the crib all the time. And they thought they were doing some cute things, dropping their toys for the baby. And I was like, no, guys, that's not okay. And so I had to relearn all over again this. But I don't know if you have some other suggestion around the safety of the sleep space and thinking about along these lines.
Yeah, I had that problem with multiple kids, and I think Casey's probably experienced this too, is when you have multiple kids constantly, especially like my older daughter loved her baby sister so much. She just wanted to bring her things, drop them in the crib. So there was a lot of coaching involved with making sure that everything that was in her sleep space was approved by a parent first. But the other things too is, make sure you've got a tight fitting mattress. Make sure you have a crib that meets safety standards. There are so many cribs out there that don't meet current safety standards. And sometimes even just like a really well-meaning grandparent might bring something out of the attic and yeah, maybe it worked for you, but you should not be able to fit a soda can through like a standard Coke size can. Okay, you should not be able to pass that through the crib slats. If you can, then that means a child could get their head stuck. So there's certain things that we really want to be careful about, and the crib is definitely one of them. But my other big one, I would say, and I'm sure Casey's got one too, but cords, at least 3 feet from the crib. Just a shameless plug because I love my sound and light machine so much. It's my favorite thing. That's why if you can get things that are cordless, right? It just eliminates the cord, or the Nanit Pro monitor. If you have in the stand, the cord's inside a metal tube, so you can't pull that stuff in, right? So just make sure there's no loose cord that they can pull into their space within 3 feet.
Yeah, I would say the other big thing that I see a lot of is parents using things that are intended as positioning devices during the day, like I don't know, I don't want to say specific brands, but things that a child shouldn't fall asleep in. They should, even if they're supervised, they shouldn't fall asleep in it. But when you have other kids running around, or when you're like, oh my gosh, I just need to warm up my coffee for a second, and they doze off and you don't want to wake them or you don't want to stir them, like those are the kinds of things too that I feel like are milestone related, in that, yes, they're comfy and they're cozy, but like they could roll out of it, or they could roll to their belly or roll against the side of it and not be able to get air. So I think just being really conscious of, even like what Holly was saying, just because something is on the market doesn't necessarily mean it's safe, or it's safe like across the board in all situations, so again, taking into consideration your child, what they're doing, your living space, if there's other children, just really kind of thinking about those things so that you can set up an environment that's as safe as possible.
That's
yeah. I see a comment of an example. So like things like infant loungers. So those would be like a pillow-like device that a lot of people use on the floor as a space to hang out if they're, in the living room with their baby and they've just got baby on the ground, because you can't fall off the ground. That's a good thing, right? It's better than having them in a like floor seat up on a countertop somewhere. But those loungers are one of the areas. But I also see it with bouncers. I see it with swings. you have to keep in mind that they really aren't sleep devices, and it's really hard when you're a parent, and especially a new parent and an overtired parent,
And they
to
finally
wake a
fall
sleeping
asleep.
baby or risk waking a sleeping baby. I know the feeling, but their airway is what we're worried about, the angle, what they could roll into, and anything that has straps. If the straps are loosened or not used correctly, or if the child is asleep, we're worried about those entrapment injuries if they become stuck on the straps. So it's really hard. It's really, really hard. But yeah, that's why the advice is there to move them to a safe space when they fall asleep.
Yes, that's a great advice. And so let's just like shift a few months after. So we did some rolling, and now it's time to get moving around the house. And that's when the fun starts. They can reach anywhere. They maybe start to crawling, pulling up, and eventually walking. How can we get prepared for this hurricane? How can we get ahead of this?
For me, from a motor standpoint, I encourage you to start teaching. If you have stairs in your home, even if you have a gate, even if you have it all set up, start teaching how to navigate the stairs as independently and safely as possible through crawling up or scooting down on their butt, whatever feels best for your situation. I start that as soon as they are moving, even if it's army crawling, even if you're like, there's no way they would get to the gates. Again, it's like, the toddler leaves the gate unlatched or doesn't realize you're upstairs, or there's so many times. So applying it to stair safety, but also furniture safety, like just every time you go to get your baby off of the couch, or if they're sitting on the couch, flip them to their belly and guide them feet first down, and say the same thing every single time. You will be doing all of it in the beginning. You'll be fully showing them, but when it clicks, I'm telling you, the relief that you will feel, like, okay,
Yeah.
they know how to do it safely, and they'll apply it across the board. Like they'll be at the park on the playground slide, going down feet first, like you'd be amazed how quickly they catch it and apply it. And again, like the peace of mind, if you have stairs or even a little step or just furniture in your home, knowing that they have the tools to be safe is so invaluable.
And I will say too, Casey's Instagram is one of my favorite resources to send parents to for videos on stair safety and learning to climb, because she has them for different stages too. So you can kind of see the progression. But that's something that, yeah, I definitely had anxiety about, but the visual of it is really, really good. So if you are not on Casey's Milestones of Motherhood Instagram, definitely check it out after the webinar, because there's some really great videos that she's got out there.
Yeah, there's examples there and everything too, if you need of exactly how to do it. So thanks.
All right. So I think I had one question that I was thinking of that could sort of cover all these things. Like it's just because many of us have just come back maybe from vacations during the summer, when we travel, what are some, and maybe I'm catching a little bit, this is something we didn't plan, but it just came to my mind because I was thinking, I don't have stairs at home, but when I visited my parents in Italy, they have stairs everywhere, and I was freaking out because they didn't have a gate in the beginning and my kids were not used to it, or like, and there's all these things are like, we're used to our crib and our safe space. What are some tips that you can give to parents wherever we might travel, visiting families, going to an hotel, of some things that they can do to feel like, okay, I've got this, I can go to bed and rest and not have to freak out the entire day that my kids are gonna sleep in.
Yeah. So this is where that yes space is really helpful. And especially if you are flying somewhere with a little one, usually most airlines will have some kind of policy about being able to take a few pieces of gear with you. So depending on where you're going, and especially if it's overseas, right? Let's say you're going to Italy. You probably want a stroller if you're going to be doing a lot of walking. And consider maybe a play yard or a travel crib, something that you would take with you as a sleep space, but that could also double as a yes space, because you're going to need to shower, and as much as whether it's a grandparent in Italy or grandparent here, I had one at my in-laws' house because, I know that they care about my kid and I know they'll supervise my kid. but there's moments that they might just need to get something out of the oven. And so in those moments, you can't be right there with my kid. Can you just put them in this space? I know, even if it's just for a minute, but that way we'll know they're safe, and then we don't have to worry about anything happening. So consider something like that. It's great for travel when you're flying on the airplane. But also for hotels, everyone hates when I say this, but get on your hands and knees and just look under the bed, please. There is so much gross stuff in hotels. And I know we've all seen the blacklight videos. Okay, you can wash your hands afterwards. You can put a towel down if you don't want to be on the floor. But I need you to look under the bed, because that is eye level for a child if they're crawling. And also, sorry, they'll probably be on the ground too. But it's important that if there are any choking hazards that have rolled under the bed, that we grab them right away so that they're not the ones finding it first.
Yeah. And I would say too, just adding to that, for peace of mind, like I'm not exaggerating. If you practice that furniture safety and the stair safety, they will apply it in settings that you would not believe, like getting off of a curb in a parking lot, like kids will flip to their belly and try to scoot down, like really being consistent with it, you would be amazed. Like of course, maybe you'd have to show them a couple times, you'd have to be right there, but like they will apply it to other situations and to other settings. So it really is such a valuable thing to teach because of that, you know, and the peace of mind that it gives.
Yeah, sooner than later, especially Europe, so many stairs.
And something you touched upon also, Holly, about the communication, because it's true, we're not always going to be the one in charge of our kids, right? And I think, you know, maybe with your partner is something that you discuss more often, but especially when you go to visit grandparents, or, you know, there's babysitters, and like that, you have this communication of what you know is okay, and that they also know that we have these rules and we have this. I think that's so important, and just so that you, if you're not there, you actually know that they're okay and that they're in good hands, and that who is with them knows all the things that are important for you. So that's a great piece of advice. So I think as we're sort of wrapping towards the end of our talk, we've touched upon a lot of topics, but I wanted to know if we can get a little bit into details of what are some things that you would recommend, some things that you would not recommend. And I think we've mentioned some things here and there, but maybe, you know, if you have your top 5 things, you can sort of go through them and let us know. I know a lot of expecting parents or parents with little ones that I'm sure are super interested in where can they use their money in the best way possible.
Well, one of the reasons I always love doing these webinars with Nanit is because I do actually love Nanit stuff. And thank you, Nanit, for the sound and light machine, because this is my favorite thing. I go to sleep with it every night. It was supposed to be for my kids, and I stole it, and I love it. And it's cordless. It's great. The camera, it is such a good camera from a safety perspective, but also just, you know, being able to have that view. It can give you that little bit of peace of mind for especially anyone who's anxious like me, just to know you can always check in on them. And there's like cry detection now. There's like an alert zone. You can like mark off inside the view of the camera what is able to be an okay place for them to go and a not okay place. So I usually mark off my office as a no-go zone. So if I had a kid that was like creeping towards my office, I'd be like, that's not the playroom, go back the other way. So things like that, right? Like it's good to be able to have some technology to help you balance that peace of mind.
Yeah, and you cut out for a bit, or it might have been me, but did you mention the milestone feature too?
No, go ahead.
So this is new to me, but from my understanding, it's that it will actually catch the milestones and document them and record them for you, so that you have that if it's happening in the crib and maybe you're asleep and you didn't see them roll for the first time or anything like that. Like, that is so cool. I think that's awesome. I feel like every parent needs that.
And that's definitely something that is so cool to share with grandparents overseas in Italy, but also even closer ones. They got so excited.
Yeah.
Yeah, another project thing we touched upon were like, you know, things for yes spaces? What are some, like, I think we touched a little bit upon what could be some good things, but like pack and play, but also like little mattresses, right? And things like that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. In terms of stuff like that, so I think my biggest tip would be don't overcomplicate it. Like, don't feel like you need all of the things. Like, literally a blanket on the floor or a nice little rug or playmat, if that fits in your space and you want it. And if you need some sort of border, if they're mobile, if you have other kids, if you have animals, that sort of thing, something like a pack and play is a great option. Something like those little pop-out gates. I know there are some that are fold up. Like, we have one that we would fold up and take it outside when my youngest, like, I was like, he can't be eating grass and dirt and sticks while the other two are running around. So I would put him in it right next to us, and carry it right back inside, you know? So something like that is appropriate for your space, a good size for your space, but also don't feel like you have to have all of the things. Like, you can create a yes space with a blanket and a couple of your favorite toys, or just you on the floor with them. So I think it's easy to maybe hear this kind of stuff and be like, oh my gosh, I need everything. I need a bubble, you know, but like, it's, you can keep them safe and foster independence and floor play and mobility and all of that stuff without having all of the things too, you know?
That's great advice. Again, being in a 2-bedroom apartment, I love that. Keeping it simple can work. Change their diapers on the ground, just have one blanket.
Totally.
Awesome. That works
Exactly.
for me. So we are getting some great questions in the Q&A. So since, like, I think we have like 12 minutes left, I just wanted to start to look at some of them. And if there's other people that have more, please feel free to, this is the right time to put them in the chat, in the Q&A box. So there's one question about how to keep windows safe. What would you recommend, Holly?
Yeah, so with the windows, the recommendation is to limit them to 4 inches or less, right? That's the magic number to try to prevent those falls. And it depends on the type of windows that you have. You can't really see my windows right now, but I have those crank out windows, which are called casement windows. And with those, you can get these bars that look kind of like a little metal arm that closes and opens, and that will make it so that the window can't be cranked out more than 4 inches. And I will type this into the chat as I say it, but they are called WOCDs, which stands for Window Opening Control Device, a very technical name. But those are for casement windows. There are also little stops you can get that adhere to the window for windows that slide. So there is a solution for pretty much everything. I know I've got a few posts on window options as well on my Instagram for reference. But if you're ever stuck or you're like, oh, I can't figure this out, a window company is a good place to check with, because they will often have that stuff in stock, because a lot of code, depending on where you live, may require it for new builds anyway. So it's a good thing to check with a window company if you're totally stuck or you don't know what type of window your window is.
Yeah, that's great advice. Another question is about where to put the car seat in the back seat, if there's a best place to put the car seat in the back seat.
Okay, so this is
probably.
Yeah.
But maybe there's a quick message that we can give.
The guidance has kind of changed on this a little bit. We used to tell people to install it in the middle, and the idea was that if you got hit from any part of the vehicle, that you would kind of have the baby in this bubble. But the middle seat over the years has become really challenging to get good installs. Oftentimes they're very cramped, or there's like a little gap there that the seat can fall into because of a 60-40 split going on. So really the advice at the end of the day, it's the spot in the back that you can get it's the best install. So wherever you get the most solid install and it's installed correctly is the safest spot. And that can change. You know, when you have one kid, it's often on the passenger side because you're trying to save some legroom for the driver. But then when you have 2 kids, that might change. You might have to start doing what I like to call car seat puzzles and moving things around and seeing where you can kind of fit a seat and how do things fit together. So really where you can get the safest install, the most solid install for that car seat is going to be the safest spot. So it's a hard one. But again, if you're ever stuck, reach out to a car seat tech, get your seat checked, and they can also help guide you with what might fit.
That's great. We have one question about stairs. There's an 18-month-old that loves stairs. Who doesn't? At that age, they have a gait, but they still want to try to go up and down, and they want to actually do the stairs instead of, going down on their butt or crawling up. And so the question is like, what is the boundary? What should I let her do? And how much independence should I give? And I think it's a good question, because we want to foster the independence, but understand what is the boundary? Where do we intervene?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So typically, the way that I would teach a stair progression, depending on the child, the stair setup, that sort of thing, the family situation, is around that time, if they are independently walking and fully independently walking and wanting to be in standing on the stairs, I start to teach it. Because again, if you're not there for a split second and they're like, I can do this in standing, and they try, if you've given them at least a little bit of that knowledge and that motor plan, you're in a better place. But what I typically try to do at that stage is teach them to turn and hold both rails with both hands instead of trying to step up. Like I feel that sometimes we get a little bit hung up on like, they should be alternating feet. They should be only holding on with one hand. When it comes to stairs, I don't care about any of it. They will figure stairs out. I promise you, they'll figure it out when they are in a situation that they have to navigate stairs at school for the first time or something like that. But teaching them in the safest way possible, in my opinion, is in standing, having them turn. Also, because their little legs are not big enough usually at 18 months to take a full step up, but when they're sideways, they can shift their weight a little bit, holding on and clear the next step. So that's my personal preference at that stage. And then as they get stronger, they'll just naturally take one hand off and start to navigate them a little bit more. But that's the way I prefer to teach it in standing around that age, especially if they're showing interest.
Great. One last question, because I think we're getting towards the end of our session, is about starting food and starting solid food. And I think this is like another ginormous topic. And so the question is like, what are the recommendations starting purees, or what food first? Is there like any few words of advice that we can give around this?
So I will say there's a little bit of scope of practice here in terms of what I can talk to, because you really want to talk to a dietitian or nutritionist around this particular one with the what is best for your child aspect. But what I can say from my perspective working in injury prevention is we know that if you're following things like baby-led feeding by the book, there is no evidence to show that there are increased choking risks compared to purees. So it's about texture. It's about preparing the food safely. So if we know that we're, following the guidelines for their age and development in terms of that texture and what they can handle, and watching them learn to process that food in their mouth, there's not a heightened risk of choking with that approach. But sometimes it just makes you nervous. And I also want you to know it's okay to just do purees if that's what makes you less nervous. So, speak to someone if you ideally, hopefully have someone on your healthcare team that can help you navigate that. But yeah, I would say that, if you're anxious about that, make sure you've got those CPR choking skills down. But it's thankfully no greater risk with that when you're doing it by the book. Yeah.
And for example, I did a mix. Oh, sorry, Casey. I was just to say that I did a mix because I was feeling very confident doing baby-led weaning when I was there. I was not feeling super great when my child was with the babysitter, and I could trusted her completely, but it was me. I just couldn't do it. And so when the baby was not with me, we're doing purees, and when the baby was with me, we're doing maybe, and it's fine. Like, I think like there's a piece that we need to understand, what do we feel good about, knowing that both choices are okay for our baby. But Casey, oh, sorry.
I was just going to add, and I know that there is a whole specific starting salads one, so I won't go too much into this, but from a motor perspective, there are things that we also look at to know that baby is a little bit more ready for solid introduction. Things like, are they at least able to sit briefly when you put them in a sitting position? Do they have solid head control? Is their tongue thrust reflex gone? There are certainly things that you can look for that will hopefully give you a little bit more peace of mind to say, okay, physically they seem pretty ready, and so they can manage it, that sort of thing. But yeah, not to go too much into it.
One comment on that, because I just popped into my mind when you said that with tongue thrust reflex. This is going to sound like weird advice, but please hear me out, because I've been told over the years this is one of the best pieces of advice I give out. Go on YouTube, look up videos of other people's children gagging on food and see them work through it, and desensitize yourself a little bit, because that way when it happens with your child and you know what it looks like and you can recognize it, it is a lot easier to step back and manage it calmly. And it's, again, I know it sounds like weird advice, but there's plenty of videos you can watch of kids gagging and getting through it in that starting solids phase.
Awesome. All right, so the time definitely flew, and we are at the end of our session. We just have a few minutes left. So I just wanted to thank you for all the amazing advice. I feel like I have 3 kids and I've still learned a ton, and probably a lot of these advice would have helped me being way less anxious with my first 2 kids. So I'm so grateful that we can, share all this amazing information with our parents. And also thank you all parents that have logged in, and we hope that this was informative for you. Have a great night or evening depending on your time zone, and thank you again, Holly and Casey.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, everyone.